Well, thank you so much, Senator Singleton, for coming in. I just want to start by talking a little bit about, I was talking to my son yesterday, and I told him that I was going to be having you on a podcast, and his eyes lit up. He was like, Coach Troy. And he said something he never told me before. He said, you know, Coach Troy knew I wasn't the most, talented football player because you coach Little League football. He wasn't manly or masculine, as you can say, as a little kid. But you told him that he's one of the smartest players you ever had. Mm-hmm. And he remembered that, and that had an impact on his life.
Awesome.
And he was like, yeah, Coach Troy, man, like when you told me that, he always made me feel welcome. Didn't make me feel that I was less than because he wasn't like the other little boys. Mm-hmm. And he remembered that, and that catapulted him, I think, part of what he has done, being on Broadway, having the confidence to be a singer, dancer, actor. And I always applaud folks like yourself who coach Little League, who work a full-time job. One of my good friends does it, and I always admire you guys for doing that. Mm-hmm. The impact that you have on kids' lives. And I don't know if people knew that about our history, that I first met you as Coach Troy.
That's right.
And you were coaching my son. But he told me that yesterday, and he never told me that before. So I just want to let you know that you really had an impact on his life.
That's a great story. Like, it's so funny. Like, I would still be coaching kids if the time would allow it, because it's just so rewarding to be a part of the maturation of young boys and girls as they're growing. Like, I've coached girls basketball, boys football, boys basketball, et cetera, just watching them grow. And I do remember Jordan in this regard. He always was in the right spot at the right time. Now, and he'll tell you that he was there. He might not always made the right play, but he was always where he was supposed to be. He wasn't the best football player. But it's one of those things, like when you think about that, it's like for so many of us, we've had someone in our life who you never thought of, who actually guided us along. And for me, for example, I went to Catholic school in Philadelphia. I grew up in Philadelphia before we moved to South Jersey, in a section of Philadelphia called Germantown. And I went to Catholic school there, and I remember having a janitor in the school who just saw us all being knuckleheads. We're all urban Catholic school kids acting stupid and crazy. And I remember him tugging me to the side, like I had to be in like third or fourth grade, tugged me aside and said, look, he said, your friends look at you as a leader. Mm. He said, you don't see yourself as a leader because you're just hanging with the guys. But I watch how they mimic or do things that you do. And he said, when you're a leader, comes a different level of responsibility. He said, always remember that no matter where you go, like people got to have their eyes on you. And because of that, you got to hold yourself in a different way. And like when you're like 8, 9 years old, it doesn't really resonate with you. But like much like Jordan and his story about his old coach, it's like it reminded me too, as I continue on through life, it's like no matter what I do, there is somebody watching. Mm-hmm. And I always say this thing like as an example to people, when they achieve something, I'm like, because of you, there's someone else who thinks they can. Yeah. Because you're from where they're from, or you look like them, or you share some other commonality or characteristic. And because of that, you have an obligation to carry yourself different because you are role modeling someone behind you who you may not even know, may not even see. So that's very kind of Jordan. I'm so thrilled for his success. Yeah. Love watching him from afar. He's just an incredibly talented young man.
Athletic he wasn't an athlete, so he picked the right career.
There it is.
But you had a big impact on his life. Let's talk a little bit about Germantown, your house, your household. What was your household like? Was you had siblings? Like what was it like growing up?
So grew up in Germantown. My father was a union shop steward for a company still around, called Charles Jacquelin's Liquor Distillery. Mm-hmm. Used to make the cheapest, most crazy alcohol you could think of. My dad's sort of Christmas bonus was always bringing alcohol home, which was good for him and his boys, right? But my dad worked there, and my mother worked for the Internal Revenue Service. Mm-hmm. And she started as a seasonal and rose all the way up to whatever GS number she left at before she was done. But I remember so much about my parents who are no longer with us in this regard. My father was the oldest in his family. So oldest of 5. So my father was the oldest, had every bit of dream aspiration of going on to college. And actually had started night school at Drexel University. He was going to be an architect. And it's funny because we're in this beautiful building here and we're talking about architecture in the background, and he was going to do that. And then my grandfather, who I never met, passed away. So my father, being the oldest, had to put his own dreams aside in order to become the man of his family. and literally started working just odd jobs out of college, multiple jobs to help my grandmother to provide for his 2 younger brothers and 2 younger sisters. And I remember my dad said to me, he said, "You don't always get to live your dreams, but you always have to live your responsibilities." And like that's something that is carried with me forever. And he was of that mindset. And he was like, he could have been who knows what, was brilliant, but just had to just go in the field and start working. Union Teamster, rose up in those ranks to be a shop steward. And, union politics is cutthroat. And he did what he had to do to make sure that his guys who worked for him were successful. And my mother, who, God rest her soul, was the backbone of our family, as a IRS worker, no formal training, rose up and led teams of tax auditors and tax professionals and just managing that aspect of the business. So for my younger brother and I, having 2 parents like that who just worked hard, diligently, kind of instilled in us this idea of how we have to work to be able to get ahead. So it's unfortunate that none of them are with me anymore. My younger brother, my parents are all now going on to the ancestors, but it is one of those things that, you'll see them again someday and that sort of thing, but you really reflect upon those lessons in those quiet moments.
Wow, Troy, I didn't realize that, man. And you talk about your dad and navigating the politics of the union. So was politics discussed in your home? Was that something that was brought up about?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like, my dad never talked politics in our house. Really? Never, ever. And it was one of those things, I think, because of some of the stuff that my dad went through being African-American guy in a organization in that local that did not have a lot of African-Americans, and being a shop steward at his place, I don't think he wanted to get into a lot of that nitty-gritty. And frankly, my mother didn't want to hear about it. So I think that for us was sort of how it all came about. Like, we really didn't focus on politics at all. Like, I am literally an accidental politician. There's no desire ever to have done it. And it's sort of way it sort of manifested itself was literally just one day a college internship changed the course of my life. And that is what led me down this path of government and to politics.
I never knew that. Yeah. How did that happen? What happened?
Sure. So I'm a college junior at Rowan University. And I'm sitting there trying to figure out what I want to be. And I wanted to be a stockbroker. Like, that was my thing. It was a finance degree. That's my major. I wanted to be in Wall Street. I had this love affair with money and how it worked and how to make it work for you. And I remember getting an internship working for one of the brokerage houses. And I realized, as I'm sitting there talking to the individuals and working with folks, I can't do this for the rest of my life. Like, this grind, this hustle, I couldn't do it. And I remember having to have this conversation with my parents. And I was definitely afraid. First person in my family to go to college, to tell them I'm almost done. But by the way, everything I've been studying, I hate, and I want to go do something different. So a mentor who was on campus, who was working in Trenton, said, "Hey, we take internships," and they were paid, which was also the plus word when you're in college, paid internship. He says, up in Trenton, you can get a chance to work in the Assembly Democratic office at the time. So I went up there with no illusions of what it could be, get in there, and I just got fascinated by the body politic and realizing and talking to folks there that politics and government especially touches every aspect of our life. And as I was in that mix, I was like, man, I want to be a part of this. So once I graduated college, literally that following fall, the local representatives, Assemblyman Herb Conaway and Assemblyman Jack Connors, won their first election, which was 1997. They won their election then. And someone remembered a kid from Willingboro. We had moved to Willingboro after when I started high school. This kid from Willingboro was an intern, was really sharp, and he's local. Maybe you want to give him a chance. And I remember getting my interview in Jack Connors' dining room, myself and Herb, and just talking to them about where I come from, what I did, and how I thought I could help them as a legislative aide. And that's how I got my start. Never looked back since.
That's amazing. I never knew that. I mean, wow. I mean, that's fascinating because you yourself have become, people, they may watch the podcast and think I'm just bullshitting, but I always tell you, like, you're one of the most effective legislators in the entire state.
Thank you.
And I say that with all sincerity because I work with you. We work on legislation together. Sure. And I've been in your presence. I've been, the pieces of legislation you worked on it's historic.
We've done some cool things, that's for sure.
I mean, particularly in the housing space. What is it about housing that really interests you? Like, how did you get involved in housing?
Well, So for anyone to have a stable future, right, it has to start with making sure you don't got to worry about the roof over your head, right? And I think a friend of mine said, like, housing and housing policy, like, it is the cornerstone of where so many other aspects of public policy are built, right? Where you can't have a good healthcare, education, economic policy if your housing policy is not up to par. So this idea of giving everyone equity of opportunity, right? And we can't be all things to all people. Like, I firmly believe that. But I think we have an obligation to give everyone equity of opportunity to achieve whatever it is the best version of themselves. And if we do that right, and we secure the housing piece that's associated with it, so you're not worrying about a roof over your head, it is amazing what people can do, right? It's amazing what people can do when they come from zip codes that folks don't want to live in to achieve the highest level of success because they had a structured and safe housing environment. So for me, I just want to make sure that everybody at least has that equity of opportunity. What you make of it after that, that's a plan that's already been written by a higher power than me. But like, if we don't start fundamentally with making sure that folks at least have an opportunity to live in a safe, nurturing housing environment, have that structure over their head, I guarantee you none of the rest will work. It's like a house of cards. It falls down when the house isn't there.
Did your upbringing background play a role in that? And I mean, you grew up in Germantown, which, back then was, probably one of the rougher areas to grow up.
That's true.
You went to Germantown High School for a little bit, right?
Briefly, just before we got over to South Jersey, but I was in Willingboro pretty quickly in my freshman year. Yeah.
So you understood the implications of not having a safe, decent place to live, and that play a role. And I guess your personal story kind of like affects that.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can see, right? There's so many people that you've come up with and been with from the old neighborhoods, and you go back to your old neighborhood. Just as a sidebar, so I keep in my phone a photo of the house I grew up in Germantown.
Really?
And I keep it in my phone, not just because it's nostalgia, but it reminds me always of where I came from. And it reminds me that, again, going back to the point, that no matter where you start, doesn't have to mean where you finish. But it also told me that I want to make sure that people have real opportunity for housing, right? We had, typical row home in the city, nothing fancy, nothing special. But it's one of those things that you couldn't tell me we didn't have it all because you didn't know any better, right? But now that you get a broader view, college helped me get that. My professional life has helped me get that. It helps me understand even more how important that housing is. So it all started from 4559 Fern Hill Road in Germantown, teaching me, like, we want to make sure that people have an opportunity to live out their best version of themselves.
Fern Hill Road.
That's right.
Near Fern Hill Park.
That's right. Literally a block up the street.
Wow.
Block up the street. That's
wow.
Right.
That's incredible, man. Like, and I don't know, people don't know all the legislation you work on, but I'm going to point out a few because they're historic. One is the Fair Chance in Housing Act, which is the strongest law in the country that limits the use of criminal background checks for folks who are trying to get housing. Because we know people are going back 20 years, looking back, folks trying to get housing and they've paid their debts to society. And one of the hardest things for a person to do, a returning citizen, is to get a job and get a house. And you sponsored this legislation that really allows give the person, a returning citizen, a chance to get a home.
That's right.
Why was that so important to you?
It's a basic principle, right? For me, like, the overwhelming majority of people who right now are behind the walls will come home. So the question we ask ourselves in our society are twofold. One, what do we want them to come home to? If we want them to come home to an environment that allowed them to go behind the wall, then that is what'll happen if you don't structure a bunch of things around. If you don't structure good reentry programs, if you don't structure an opportunity for someone who's paid their debt, who's now making money, has an ability to get shelter over their head to do it. If you deny folks that opportunity, folks will go back to what they know. And typically what they know is what got them behind bars in the first place. So if you care nothing, you don't care a lick about those people, you should care about public safety. And public safety increases when people have the ability to have sustainable housing associated with themselves, especially those who have the means to do it. So we did that for a whole host of reasons, primarily so because when folks come home, I don't want them to have any reason to have to go back. I want them to have no reason to have to go back. And if you can't have a roof over your head, you will do whatever it takes. And that, unfortunately, leads to escalation in crime. So not only is this helpful for that person's rehabilitation, it actually safeguards our community. And in partnership with those who maybe saw it differently than many of us, we worked to try and bring and incorporate many of those suggestions that folks gave to us. Now, mind you, there'll still be folks who are going to say that's a population of people they don't want to talk about, they don't want to think about. But once again, the overwhelming majority of people who are behind the bars today will come home to our society. What do we want them to come home to?
Yeah. Yeah, and we talk about that issue, particularly in a state like New Jersey, where overwhelmingly they're mostly people of color.
Sure.
How did that play a role in your life? And this is a weird question, but when did you realize you were Black?
Oh, shoot. I realized I was Black the first time I went to a private school event outside of the city when we used to play CYO basketball in the city.
I remember that.
And we used to play down a place called Gustine Lakes Recreation Center. And we played.
But you had to know how to play at Gustine Lakes.
That's right. And we played a team from the suburbs. And I remember parents saying, I can't believe you losing to a bunch of niggas out here.
Wow.
Like, and we sat, and that was the first time I had literally heard that word, because I grew up in Germantown. Like, being white was the anomaly in my backyard, right? I still remember the one cat from 1st grade to 8th grade I went to school with, my man Stephen Carr. Literally, in my first 8 years of school, I went to school with 2 white people the entire time of my career. Stephen Carr and Barbara Buck. 2 cool people. Barbara I still see today on the soccer pitches in South Jersey. And Stephen, who was a dear friend as we made our way. But that was the first time that I ever had someone actually smack racism in front of my face. Because when you're around everybody who's Black all the time, you don't think about it. You don't see it. But that was it. And I was like, wow, okay, this is what we dealing with. Wow. And I remember telling my parents around that. And I remember my dad telling me, boy, get used to it. Because as you go beyond this city, you will see different things, right? And I never thought of that, never, gave it any context. But as you continue to grow, when you sit in classes where you're no longer the majority in that class, where you're the one person that sits in that class, when you get invited to high academic achievement things or leadership things, and there's not many who look like you, then it crystallizes in your mind that you got to work twice as hard, got to be on time earlier, you got to do all the things that our parents taught us, that some of my colleagues who aren't Black, who aren't minority, never had to have that conversation.
It's very interesting because my first experience realizing that I was Black, I would go to Mendenhall, Mississippi every year in the summer with my godparents, my godbrother. We grew up, Rob Lee.
Yeah, very much.
We grew up spending our summers in Mississippi. And one time we were all jumping in the car and our godparents' father was taking us into Jackson. That was in the city. And so we got in the car and said, listen, don't speak to anybody. Don't say nothing. Just stay with me and be careful what you say. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, we're in a dangerous situation. And I, when I went to see the Emmett Till exhibit, I realized that I could have been Emmett Till, a kid from the North area going down to the South and not knowing the protocol. Because like you said, we grew up in predominantly segregated areas. We didn't think anything about it.
That's right.
When we saw white people, we didn't think anything about it. We would speak or say whatever, but down there it was tough. So it's I like to ask that question because sometimes we don't think about race until it really smacks us in the face.
Yeah, you're right. I remember my grandmother who lived in South Carolina, and we would make our annual sojourn down south every summer and spend time on her farm. And she lived in Clarendon County, South Carolina. So the backwoods part of South Carolina. And whenever we went to the city, right, it was that same connotation. And my family down there would really caution us on what we said and how we said it. And now, mind you, this is like the 80s. This is like, I was like, from like when I was between like 9 to like 13, 14. So we talking like 1982 to like 86.
Not long ago.
87-ish. Like, was like, be mindful of what you say and how you say it down here. And I remember my cousins and my extended family really honing in that message. So I can relate to that very much so.
Tell me a little bit about was faith or religion part of your childhood, your upbringing? Did you get involved with it?
Yeah, so it's funny. We have this great family history, right? So my father's side of the family are all Southern Baptists.
Really?
Yeah. So my grandmother was deaconesses in the church. My aunts are all deaconess in the church. It's how my father's side grew up. My mother was a Catholic. So my mother became Catholic as an adult. And when I was still young, real young. And then I got baptized in the Catholic faith was an altar boy, the whole
Get
thing,
out,
right?
really?
The whole. I will tell you, like, literally, until puberty hit, I thought I was going to be a priest. And then puberty changed all that for me, but I thought I was going to be a priest, for real. And I remember like being a part, again, in an urban Catholic parish. It's like still a different environment, different vibe. But in that time, Germantown, we still had a decently diverse mix, at least in the Catholic church. It wasn't the sort of white flight to the suburbs hadn't crystallized fully yet. But like when the sort of crack epidemic hit really in the 80s, toward the late 80s, right when we moved, you started seeing less and less white folks in the city, and less white folks in the church and in our parish there. But it was the old, beautiful, ornate, big churches right down on Shelton Avenue in Germantown was massive. And I remember riding by there not too long now. Now that church is, since the diocese sold it and some other organization owns it. But I just remember all the stories of conducting mass in there. And for me, faith continues to this day to be a guiding principle that I adhere to, right? So I internalize it. I go to different churches now because I don't think any one faith, right, has cornered the market on true spirituality and connectivity to your Lord and Savior, however you choose to believe it. So I go where the message moves me. And that has been to all different types of churches and synagogues, you name it. And to me, faith is still really a cornerstone of how I kind of govern myself in decisions I make.
That's pretty interesting. I'm curious to see, what was there a certain event in your life that brought you to that place? Because, you know, I'm a reverend, but I have an imam, I have a Buddhist teacher, I have a rabbi.
Sure.
So, you know, I went to school late. I went back to school late Temple and graduated the degree in religion. So I enjoy all the faiths. But was there, but not, you know, it's rare. I don't want to say rare, but some people don't come to that place. Not that it's judging anybody, but like, I know what moment changed my life to move towards that direction. Was it a significant moment in your life that?
So I think like coming up, it becomes just like, this is what we do, right? So I wouldn't necessarily pin it to a moment. But as I've gotten older and had to rely on my faith in moments of extreme heartache and anguish and disappointment, right, to try and figure it out, like the loss of my parents, the loss of my younger brother, it has been those things that the aspect of faith that has helped wrap itself around me, right, and help carry me forward. So I don't point to any one particular thing, but I think the foundation that I got in Catholicism, and then that has been tweaked is probably the wrong word, but as evolved as I've been interacting with different other religious precepts and principles, it has helped me in those dark moments to see that the sun will shine again.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Let's talk a little bit about the political climate in this country now.
Sure.
You know, we just had a past election. What was your thoughts on this past election?
Well, look, I was obviously surprised and frankly disappointed at the result. But I think there's a few different things around this election that if we're being honest with each other, we have to be cognizant of. Putting my Democratic official hat on, I think our party has lost sight of the conversation that people who are struggling on a daily basis and what they're struggling with, we haven't paid enough attention to that and talked to that effectively. So I think that is 100% true. And I think we as a party have to internalize how we're going to do that moving forward. But we would all be naive if we walked away from not understanding both the misogynistic and racial aspects that occurred during this last electoral cycle. I think we have to be cognizant of that too. And what it's done, I read this article, what it's done is sort of turned a looking glass into our country and the sort of worst aspects of our character, the worst aspects of our nature as a nation have been amplified by those who profit off of the chaos. And when you have folks who profit off of chaos, they continue to put people, like there's not much difference between a white person in Appalachia, a struggling Hispanic family in Camden, or a struggling African-American family in Germantown. Like there's not much difference.
Nope.
But there's some who will pit those groups against each other so that they get so clouded with this idea of fighting one another that they don't realize that they're getting scraps on the table while someone else is eating their food and their portion and someone else's portion at the same time. And because of that, we get caught up in this thing of always looking for who can I blame? Who can I blame? Rather than looking at a system that is designed to sort of create have and have-nots. Not a system that's designed to create equity of opportunity. And because of that, we continuously fight one another. And from a puppet master sort of standpoint, they sit back, get extraordinarily rich behind it, and keep the political power concentrated in the hands of a few small people. And that is what this election told to me. There is an enormous amount of misinformation. There's an enormous amount of people who regurgitate things they hear online. We've no longer been able to critically think our way through some of the things that we hear and see. We're just comfortable regurgitating that. And we've now become the politics of persona, where we're willing to wrap ourselves around a persona rather than a higher ideal of what our democracy is. And because of that, all it takes is somebody to come into the thing as a charlatan and say, look at me, they're bad, I'm good, without any substance to figure out how are you gonna make my life better?
Yeah.
Like, how will you make my life and my children's life better in a way that's a credible path to see that success? And because of that, people get caught up in saying, I just feel so bad, I need to figure out who I need to hate. I'm struggling right now, so who do I need to be mad at? And somebody with a megaphone says, be mad at that person. Be mad at these people. And they do. And they lose sight of the fact that they're getting played every day.
You know, Troy, I mean, this is powerful because, I mean, I remember reading about Dr. King's letter to Birmingham jail. And behind the story was, while he was in there, he started questioning the police officers who arrested him. Where do you live? How much do you make? And what he said to them, you guys should be out here protesting with us. You're not getting paid much. You're not living well. And that's the story, right? We're all being duped. We're all being fooled. And it's amazing that, you know, I'm listening to you talk about this, because this is something I think need to be more common, and people need to start understanding, like, we're all being played, right? This issue around race. And one of the things that we started this podcast is really just dispel this myth of race. Race is a social construct. While, like, LBJ talked about that, you know, poverty, like you talk about Appalachia. I mean, I wish some folks in New Jersey would go to Salem City, go to Salem County, and see how folks are living down there, black and white folks.
That's right.
Like, it's horrible. And so we're playing this game while we're all being exploited. It's very interesting you brought that up. I mean, it's pretty powerful. You know, what would you say? How would we solve this polarizing political climate right now in this country?
Yeah, so one of the things we have to do is get back to honest and real dialogue around civic education, and also understanding that it is not a bad thing to talk about the ills of our country, right? So I'm often fascinated by the broad conversation around D&I, right? I'm fascinated by it because there are some who tell you that they do not want to talk about these certain chapters of our history, which, as painful and as terrible as they have been, it is a part of our American story. So people say we don't want to talk about that. And I sit there and I say, we will never learn and be able to be better if we don't have an honest and critical dialogue at what led us down the path of all the torturous components of that American history, right? We can't move forward in a way of substance. And too often we get caught up in not spending enough time really trying to educate one another about that past, but more importantly, our place in our current democracy. Like, when it pains me when people try and talk through civic education, what their role is in our democracy. So many people don't know. Like, so many people do not know, or they're just purposefully fed misinformation because they feel like this can happen or that can happen. And one news flash for everybody: everything that every presidential candidate says they can do, they cannot do without an act of Congress. None of them. So I don't care if you're a Trump supporter, was a Harris supporter, whatever. Everything they talked about, none of it can be done because you can't govern by executive order. The courts have told us you can't do that. You cannot do that without Congress being in place. So when I sit there and people sit back and like, well, Obama was the president, he didn't do this, and that, and third. When we had complete control of the democracy, executive branch, we were able to pass the Affordable Care Act, which is substantively probably one of the greatest pieces of public policy legislation that has happened, at least in my lifetime.
Yep.
Too many people think that they hate Obamacare but love the Affordable Care Act. And I really scratch my head, right? Because there's some folks who are going to find out that they're one and the same when this new Congress comes in and seeks to dismantle it. But like, that to me is part of this ongoing misinformation component that we've dealt with. If folks were better engaged civically, had a better understanding of their role in our democracy, then they can question people on the right and the left for some of the things they put at them. because there's misinformation that's spewed on the right and the left that people just keep saying without taking the time to critically think their way through it. Because civic education, who used to be in every class, it used to be a part of the public school curriculum.
Yeah.
It's not an accident that it's no longer taught in the same substantive way. And I think we have to get back to that's why we passed legislation to do that. It's become law to really get civic education back into our schools, not to shape any ideology, but to have folks truly understand and be able to critically think their way through some of the issues they face in politics.
Wow. So what would you say to a person who's have aspirations or want to get a young person like yourself? What would you say to Troy back in the day who's an intern getting into politics? What would you say to them?
So this is a great question. So my old boss used to have this expression. He says, you have two ears and one mouth. Use it in that proportion all the time and you'll be fine. And as simple enough is to whatever field you're in, listen more than you speak. Listen to understand, what people want, because people will tell you what they want in any debate, any negotiation, if you just listen. If you're an active listener, you'll hear what they want. You also learn more by listening. My old mentor, still my mentor, is like another dad to me, was the former speaker, Joe Roberts.
Oh, yeah.
I had the greatest experience just riding and driving him in a car and just listening to him talk to me, how he thought through problems, how he thought through tricky political situations, and getting a history lesson of New Jersey. He taught me that if you just listen, people will tell you what they want. Now, you can determine if there's a way to get to yes, because that was always our goal. Let's get to yes. There's a way to get to yes. But if you are too busy waiting to talk and not listening, then you don't have that opportunity to hear what really matters to someone. And that's broadly where we're at in our politics today. Like, we as Democrats, we have stopped listening. We're waiting to talk again. We have to listen to folks and find out, not to say, how could you vote for Trump, like blah, 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 but more around, tell me why you did it.
Yeah.
And actually have a thoughtful conversation around the why. Because in that conversation, we can figure out, all right, how can we get to yes to bring that voter, bring that person back to the party that's always been about working people.
Yeah.
We have to get back to it.
Wow, that's pretty profound. Like, and this is a hard question, but just real back to the party. And I'm independent. I don't, there is a fact that the Democratic Party was the working class folks. They were, and the trickle down economics never really trickled down to working class folks, poor white folks. And this is what LBJ kept the Great Society Initiative. Like, the suffering of poor white people is just astounding. James Baldwin talked about it, right? Like, poor white people, all they have is their white skin and nothing else. And we talked about this earlier, like, just understanding what particular party, and I'm not advocating for any particular party, but has historically been for a working class family, right? And hopefully they'll get back to listening in this national election and what's happening. And we got a statewide gubernatorial election coming up soon. And I don't want to put you on the spot for that.
Sure.
But I do want to ask you a question. It's a difficult question, maybe not. Like, what is one of your proudest moments in Trenton? You've done so much. What is one of your proudest moments?
Wow, that's tough. It's like picking which baby's choose, and that's hard. I will say this. I think one of the things I'm most proud of was the work that we did on our environmental justice legislation, right? And simply put, environmental justice is no community should have a greater environmental burden than benefit. And the reason why that matters so much to me is because when we got into this issue, which predated my time in the legislature, it's how long this bill was around. Former Senator Ron Rice, God rest his soul, led the charge on that. Now Judge Grace Spencer, our former Majority Leader Loretta Weinberg, were all strong advocates for this proposal, and we can never get it beyond committee. And then when I got to the legislature, I got to partner with Ron Rice on this issue and others, and I really thought about why it mattered. And it mattered because when you grow up in certain communities, certain things you see all the time just becomes the fabric of that community. You see the asphalt treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant. You see all the insert pollution, carcinogen releasing plant in your community. It just becomes the fabric of it. So you don't think about it until you get a chance to see the world bigger and you realize where the economic stratosphere gets better, those plants aren't there.
Yeah.
So for us, what we said was, let's allow those communities to have a voice and have a stake in it, right? The economics of the decision, it shouldn't be you have to make a choice between good economic policy and good environmental policy. They can come together. And the idea of how they come together is when you let the community have a voice in the conversation. So for us, our environmental justice law was to say, let's do a cumulative impact study and let's determine if this one community has been overburdened. And if they have been overburdened, let's not burden them more by putting another type of facility in their space. That is simply what that law did. And it also gives the DEP commissioner the ability to put conditions on renewing permits. Like, all right, if you want to stay here, we know you're bad. If you want to stay here, you got to change your air filtration system. You got to do these things if you want your permit renewed. The simplest of things that we think make sense, we had to pass a law to ensure that it happens.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like that was the biggest thing. And it was big because when we did the bill signing, Sheila Oliver, who was acting governor at the time, signed it. And she said to me, she says, Troy, whisper to me, you have no idea how impactful this is right now. And I didn't really think about it until I had the chance to go back and talk to people in communities who used to play games around trying to guess which factory was putting out the smell that was in the air. Like, that's a childhood game to some people.
Yeah.
So that to me is probably one of the most impactful things that we've done that'll hopefully live long beyond me.
That's powerful, man. And then you've worked on a lot of legislation. Final question is something we ask all of our guests here on Navigating Reality. Is like, what's a quote that stands out to you? What's the quote and why? Why does it matter so much to you?
Wow. One of, I think the biggest quotes is sort of a mantra we try and live by, right? And it's a quote that we say all the time. Our entire team is can't stop, won't stop. And we say that because we don't see ourselves, and I say we, because I don't look at my team as just me, it's all of us. We don't see ourselves as politicians. We see ourselves as public servants. And we have a lot of bosses in the 7th Legislative District, and we have an opportunity to make sure that we are going the extra mile to be supportive of them. So for me, that is our siren call. Whenever we're down, whenever we're feeling we can't do anymore, we rally around that siren call to tell us that there's more that we can do. Because the issues and challenges that the people who depend upon us are so great. And we have the ability to help them navigate their way through. Like navigating reality, the reality is tough. Because in some people's lives, they say, you know, it rains every day. It is raining every day in some people's lives. They don't get a chance to save for a rainy day because it's raining every day in their life. And for us, we go above and beyond trying to make sure that we can be a respite and a source of relief for the people that we're honored and privileged to represent.
Man, I appreciate you, Troy. Like, you always shout out your staff. And again, I work with you and your staff. Your team is incredible. You're one of the brightest, smartest legislators I know. And listen, folks, you hear me say that I'm not bullshitting you. Like, we've had fights, we've had arguments.
That's true.
There have been times that I'm never talking to y'all again. Troy would say that, but you know, I think we stay focused on what the issue is, right? And we have a history. We go back, but we still argue. We still disagree. We still come to the table as advocates. Like, nah, Troy, I think you're wrong. You're like, Eric, I think you're wrong.
Right.
And we go back and forth. But ultimately, you know, it's about the outcome.
That's right. That's right.
And I think what you're doing is very profound. I can't get into all the legislation you've done that's really changed the course of New Jersey, the affordable, the Housing Act, all the affordable housing laws that you passed, codifying the current Mount Lawrence system. It's just everything. You need to look up this man's resume and see how much of a powerful legislator you are. And I believe in giving people their flowers. Like, I'm not bullshitting people. You are one of the most effective legislators in this state.
Appreciate
and I really appreciate learning a little bit about your upbringing, what motivates you, what moves you. And it's a lot of like us growing up in the same type neighborhood. Like, Troy, we're not supposed to be here, bro.
That's right. That's right. No doubt. Look, I know you probably had the same tale, like cats that we grew up with. You know, that old line is reality for us. They're dead or in jail.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's true. And like, whether it's people I grew up with in Philly or Willingboro, where I was really my home and I love the borough. That's not, we weren't supposed to, we don't get to sit here. We don't get to talk to presidents. We don't get to be rubbing elbows with CEOs. That's not where we're supposed to be, right? So every day is a blessing that we get a chance to do it. And every day is an opportunity for us to role model that behavior for someone behind us.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much, bro.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for listening. I'm Reverend Eric Dobson, and this was Navigating Realities, where dialogue meets understanding. Follow and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, and tune in on all streaming platforms. See you next time. You know, Can't Stop, Won't Stop. That's a book. Jeff Chang wrote a book about the history of hip hop. It's pretty profound. It's a great book. It talks about how hip hop got started, segregation. It's called Can't Stop, Won't Stop. Jeff Chang. It's a powerful, powerful book. It's pretty cool. So
I have to check it out. Check it out.
Appreciate you, man.
Thanks, man.